Hi, and welcome back to the Comfort Table. I'm Teal, this is Cian, and now we're nearing the end of the year. And end of the year is usually like exam season. Do you remember?
Yeah, I wasn't that upset about exam season because I had free time after the exam.
Yeah, and I guess in Singapore there's like exams happen all year round, like 4 times a year.
I think it's probably reduced to like smaller like weightage nowadays. Like I think the end of year one is more important now.
Definitely the
When we
the
were
final
schooling,
exam is
when we were schooling, the mid year was quite important as well.
yeah, the mid-year and the end-year exams were like the big ones. But still, Singapore is a very like academic,
Focus.
results focused,
Yeah.
driven society.
Yeah, we are very focused on academic results
And something really strange culturally is that when you meet someone for the first time, it's really normal to ask them what school they went to
yes.
in a kind of like subtle flex.
I feel like I don't know whether everybody asks, but like sometimes I have the problem of like I don't want to tell people what school I went to because I don't want them
Yes.
to judge.
I don't want them to assume
how-
certain things about.
Yeah, like whether I'm smart or I'm not smart or
But the truth is, in fact, that we both did go to pretty good school.
Yeah, we did.
We did.
And I think today we're gonna talk a bit about like burnout, and I think burnout in the case of maybe more people who look like they're high achieving, and how it's still a struggle. Because I think in general when we talk about burnout, a lot of it is like there's a lot to talk about. For burnout, there's like work burnout, there's just like burnout in general. I think as a society or like even globally, I think burnout is becoming more of a topic that's being discussed. And I think one thing that like I always wish was more represented or like more mentioned is like the burnout of people who seem to be very high achieving, and the struggles that like often maybe go unnoticed because they are high achieving.
Yeah, so the common misconception is that, oh, these people are, they're still producing results and they're so successful. So how can they be burned out? They're coping so well. They're still producing.
Yeah, I think I've mentioned to Teal quite a few times. I think one thing that really struck me in uni during one of the I don't know orientations or something, right? One of our seniors, somebody who got like straight A's at a point in time, meaning like the perfect score for their CAP, right? Was like quite upset that people were assuming that any advice he gave regarding studying or how to deal with stress was like not helpful. And then I think he said something that really till now I still I don't remember the exact terms, like whatever he said exactly, but the general gist of it is like, do you think that just because I got all A's that I didn't have my own struggles? And then like along the lines of like, it's quite invalidating to think that I don't have something to advise you or to offer you just because I scored better. Advice in the sense of like how to deal with stress or how to deal with failure and things like that. So yeah, what do you think about that?
Yeah, so some background is that we, I guess, both always did pretty okay in school. And
Yeah.
went to what would be considered like elite schools. But
yeah.
even though I did get into like an elite school, I don't consider myself as like one of the really smart people, because when you are put in that environment and everyone is more or less of like a
Smarter than
certain yeah
you constantly
Yeah.
feel like everyone's smarter than you, even
Yeah.
though it may not always objectively be true.
yeah, and you really
Yeah.
do meet people who are genuinely just like really smart.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they don't really seem to be struggling that much, but
I feel like okay, so maybe we should talk about our JC, because like we have a common JC. We went to different secondary schools. I think like the jump from me going from secondary school, so I took O levels, but I was still from a SEP school, so I was still from a relatively good secondary school, even though I took O levels. Till was in an IP program, so I mean, if you know Singapore, you kind of have like you probably made some
Yeah, you-
judgment in your mind about how what kind of people we are right now, right? But maybe just hold some space for that and let us talk a bit more about it. So making that move from O levels where they really taught you how to like prepare for exams to going to like the JC that we were in, I felt like it was one. I think everybody who were from the True Train program learned a lot more content than I did lah. First of all, I think the second part that really made me feel like not as smart, or feel like I was only maybe exam smart, and maybe not so smart in other aspects, was that during class when or during lectures when the teachers would teach topics, I actually don't fully understand what they say during the lecture itself, and it's only like and actually, to be fair, right, I think I don't really know what's happening during tutorials either. It's only like maybe upon revision for like papers that I start to understand what things are. And I think it took me a while to realize this as well, because I performed pretty well, like exams wise, results wise. So I always forget the fact that actually I always felt pretty dumb at the start of learning something, because it takes me quite a while to get something.
Yeah.
I'm not someone who absorbs information very fast. But then again, some people say I do. Like some people praise me for being a fast learner. So
Probably
I'm not
like
very
relative.
sure. It could be relative, because it could just be that everybody around me was learning much faster than I was, so I felt like I wasn't learning it very fast.
Yeah, it's strange that you mentioned that your transition from secondary school to JC was a shock, because it was also a shock for me, despite, having more or less the same peers
Yeah.
and the same kind of like school culture. So in secondary school I did like relatively well except for a few subjects, and then in JC suddenly I was like failing even the subjects that I was good at, maybe for like the first two tests.
The math and sciences, is it? Or the,
Yeah, I was failing in math and science, or not exactly failing, but not getting A's, which in that kind of culture is
the expectation.
the expectation. And if you don't get an A, that is more or less like failing. So I got like C's and D's, which was still a pass, but not
Like
what
the
was expected.
expectation and the
Yeah,
standards are
especially
very
since
different.
like previously I was doing pretty well in those subjects. Yeah, so there was some kind of adjustment period, changing from like a classroom teaching style to more of like a lecture and tutorial teaching style, and I struggled with that transition. But after that, after I got used to that, then my grades naturally picked up. So I remember being really stressed out about, not doing as well in the subjects. Like, what changed? Did I suddenly become stupid? Why was I not scoring well? And then, yeah, I guess I didn't need to worry that much about it, because it just resolved itself.
Yeah, so I have two things I want to mention. Like one, I think, is like this idea of actually it's maybe not a very, so like if you get the smart people and then you like promote them, sort of like when you go to the next school, you kind of put them like the smart people from all the schools go into this school, and then the smart people from this school go into the next school. You just get a group of people who are smarter than the previous like
Yeah.
schooling level, right? And as someone who goes through this, you just feel more and more average, even though maybe objectively in like of your age cohort or like your peers in general, you are probably quite smart. But because of who are around you, the people around you, then you feel like you feel like you're not that great. And I feel like Singapore as a culture, a lot of the students' worth is tied to like their grades, because it's one of the very visible things that can be measured, and it's also one of the things that take up a lot of like a young person's life.
Yes, because as a student, your main purpose is just to study, and the way you're evaluated is maybe, evaluated for scholarships, for certain like overseas programs or like bursaries. It's all grades based as well.
Yeah, and like I think the kind of environment that you are in, where like, because my sister is currently a teacher, and she teaches like students from schools where maybe they struggle even to like make ends meet financially. So like schooling isn't even their main concern. They have other concerns, but that wasn't really, which is a struggle in itself. And I'm not trying to like belittle that, but for a lot of us in the environment that we were in, right, we were in an environment where you kind of have generally stable like most things around you was quite stable, and your only I guess objective at a point in time as a young teenager was to really like study and get good grades.
Yeah, so in that kind of environment, it's very easy to dismiss these students' stresses and concerns as being, trivial, because
It's
compared to their peers, they
Or maybe,
are
you know,
relatively more secure and they don't really need to worry about things other than to, just
studying.
studying.
Right? But at the same time, yeah, I think the stress that affects a lot of people at that age still carries over.
Yeah, so some unhealthy habits that we have developed, being, I guess, nurtured or being educated in such a, I guess, high performing schooling system is that, personally, my parents never had much expectations on my grades. I guess their belief is like, as long as you have tried your best, it's fine. So they really which on the surface sounds, I guess, good advice, right? It sounds good, but the other side of it is that you must always do your best, and if you don't do your best, then nobody knows except you. So because of that, I put a lot of pressure on myself, and I really drove myself to
pass your limits
at
some point.
Yeah.
I think that was a problem that I really struggled with in university. So like, I think with a lot of people who are high achieving, like at some point you realize that no matter how high achieving you are, if you don't develop good habits, you will fail at some point, right? Like your habits will fail you at some point.
Yeah.
And I think the first time that crack really showed very obviously was like during university, although I didn't really realize it at that time. And like this idea of like trying your best, which is also like advice that my parents gave me. Like granted, my parents did want us to do well. I think I perceived them wanting me to do well more than they maybe actually expected me to do well.
That's true.
Because like when they talk to their friends and so on, like they do talk about grades. So I mean, whatever message I heard at that point was probably that lah.
And you're also like the oldest child. So
I'm the oldest child, and my siblings are fairly smart. I would say they're
all smart.
They're smarter than I am, I would say. But in different ways, we are smart in different ways. And man, even saying that is hard. When people tell me like your family is very smart, I'm just like,
yes.
Like
yes,
it's very awkward to say things like that because it's like you don't. It feels like you are not valid for struggling just because you're smart.
Yeah, like people assume just because you're smart, everything comes easily to you, but that's not the case.
Yeah.
With anything, learning requires great effort.
And I think building good habits was also maybe something that people skim past when you could, when you had the ability to do better than what was required of you. So like,
I think what were some of the unhealthy habits that you still have and you had but you don't have anymore?
Okay, I think let me talk about the ones that I still have first, right? So I think the idea of like doing, actually I don't know whether I still have it. I'm struggling with this at the moment, right? So the idea of doing your best and like how only you have that ability to gauge what's your best, right, and nobody else. So in a way it sounds good because it's something that you can evaluate. But on the other hand, for somebody who's so used to like having my achievements sort of validated by people around me, it feels very difficult to figure out what's my best. So like in university, right, what I thought was my best was to the point where I basically was burnt out and exhausted and like, just like I had no zest for life. I was super depressed without realizing it. And then I mean you could call it whatever you want. I was not officially diagnosed as being depressed. I was just super burnt out. And like I'm trying not to repeat that, but it's quite difficult for me to think of it that way because something I read is that like your best is only your best when you yourself are still healthy and able to like sustain and continue whatever you're doing. And I think my thinking of what my best is has always been past this limit because I never understood like what is a healthy limit or what is a healthy boundary. Like yes, maybe your computer can function at like this level, but realistically to avoid overheating it should perform only at this level, and this is actually your best, but what I thought was my best is maybe like here and maybe even a bit past that.
Yeah, that's actually a really good analogy. Yeah.
So like for continual function you should only like your best is probably here, but I think the expectation that I always had of myself was like, no, this is not enough. Like I didn't believe myself that this was my best.
Because that is not
That
the
is
max
not.
that you can push to, right?
Yeah, in
Yeah.
a way. Like I think knowing what is a healthy best and what is like you do this out of desperation.
Because what is best for you and what is the maximum that you can do is not actually the same level.
Yeah.
Which is something I also learned the hard way in university when I was like pushed to the brink. And then it was just when I learned more about my physical limits and my mental limits.
And it's a bit
With-
sad because you
Yeah.
were the one pushing yourself to
Yes.
that brink, right?
Yes,
Like we can try and like, put some blame, share it around the school culture and all that, but I think a big part of it is also our own upbringing and our habits. I'm not to fully blame ourselves, but
yeah.
it's a there's a lot of factors.
Yeah,
involved.
because we were the ones setting the expectations on ourselves and driving ourselves to always give a little more and to not allow ourselves to fail, which is why we put in even more effort
when things go wrong.
yeah.
Yeah, and
So-
it's like when you see people who don't do this, they don't really understand why we do this. And I don't understand how to do things the way they do it either, even though I would like to not, be so stressed and burn out. Oh, I struggled so hard, but then like at some point, right, when I got my results, it was okay. And then I felt a bit like, oh, it was worth it. But, in hindsight, actually, it's not worth it. You get what I mean? It's a bit strange. It feels a bit like I keep lying to myself. It's like I push myself. So in uni, I feel like I push myself to the brink of like exhaustion and like burnout. And I was sleeping like, at one point I was sleeping like 2 hours a day, like very, very early on in my uni years, which is like a bad idea. Don't do it. Or you can try it and then like learn it the hard way yourself, because people don't like to listen to advice. I didn't listen to advice either. So yeah, so like you can do that, or like, and then I'll think, I'm never gonna do this again. But then I get my results and I'm like, oh, it's not too bad. Like maybe what I did was worth it. Maybe I can still do it again.
Which is unhealthy because you need to know what is a sustainable level that you can go and what is like the actual max that you can work if you're a robot. So the part of this learning process is also allowing yourself to fail,
Which is very, very
which is
difficult.
very difficult. Yeah, because I used to think that failing is not giving my 100%, but 100% is not really sustainable. So if I were to
Yeah.
go at a sustainable pace, that would be considered failing. And because of that mentality, at one point in time, like
Yeah.
I was just working on my assignment and I hadn't slept in 3 days. And then on the morning on the fourth day, when the assignment was due at like, I think 8 a.m. or something like that, and then I was up at like 6 a.m. and I was like, you know what? I just like stayed up 3 whole days for this, and I'm still not done with it. I'm probably not gonna get a very good grade on it, but thinking back, if I had just like slept every night and lost, maybe like 2 hours each day, 6 hours total of work, my grade would not have changed that drastically. So the extra amount of effort that I put in foregoing my sleep would not really impact my grades, but it would impact my mental and physical well-being. So after that episode, I think something just clicked in me and I was just like, heck it, I'm gonna get at least 4 hours of sleep every night, unless dire circumstances call for an all-nighter.
I find it interesting that like when you were trying to calculate like that period when you didn't sleep and how much sleep you could afford yourself. It was only like 2 hours a night.
Yeah,
It's okay. So I think the culture that we had in uni, we were in architecture school, which is quite famous for its
inhumane
workload.
practices.
And like, I remember in the first year we were all searching like how long you could nap for and what's the optimal amount of nap time, and we only napped without sleeping. At some point, like,
At some point, yeah.
At some point, everybody tried it. So it was like 1.5 hours was a good nap time, or like 2 hours or something. I can't remember.
I even came up with this like life hack where you went to sleep or went to nap before the sun rose, and then you woke up from your nap after the sun had risen to fool yourself into thinking you had a full night's sleep. Because, you know.
Yeah, so like looking back, all of this was super unhealthy habits, and like right now when I'm working, I'm trying my best not to do this. I'm trying my best to like have boundaries and like not do too much overtime, and especially I think not to let it eat into like my rest and recovery time. So like I think there's a bit of a difference. Okay, so for me I think I need a lot of rest time. Just like my own personality, I need a lot of like downtime to recharge and like process things around me. And like I feel every time I do that I feel very guilty for like not doing more. And it's really difficult to try to keep myself in a mindset of like I'm actually trying to do what is best for me, but it feels very difficult and it feels very unnatural. And like my tendency, okay, so humans have a tendency towards what's familiar rather than what's good, right? So having been someone who has gone through burnout, my tendency is to try to do the actions that lead me towards burnout because that's familiar, but it's not good for me, right? So I think a lot of those habits were like really built up like insidiously when I was young, but it didn't really flare up as an issue at the time because like whatever I was being thrown to do, I was still able to manage. But as you get older, you realize that there's a lot of things that you can't fully cater for.
And
right?
at a certain point in time, all your
like no matter how many
habits,
contingencies or like how much hours you put in,
everything will just blow up in your face at some point.
I feel like this has taken a very pessimistic turn. But I mean, to be fair, I am kind of feeling that way right now. So maybe that's why it's taking such a turn. Like I'm currently really struggling with like trying to set healthy boundaries. I feel like I struggle between having too porous or like too rigid boundaries. Like porous as in like I would just be like, okay, I'm just gonna do this extra work, and I feel very resentful. Or too rigid as in I'll be like, no, it's time to end work. I will just go now and ignore everything. Like I find it very hard to strike a balance in between these two.
Yeah. Because of my experiences in school,
Yeah.
when I started work, I was very insistent on getting off work on time, and it did kind of more or less work. Like I realized if you do it right from the start, then people won't expect you to stay back. Like let's say you work 9 to 6, and then you know you're out of peer pressure, out of like I don't know work culture, you just stay a bit till like 6:30 and you leave at 6:30. But no, I would just at 5:45, 5:50 pack my stuff, and then at 6 just leave the office, tap out, and go. And I guess if you are like a new fresh grad, fresh hire, people don't really expect much of you in terms of work because you're just a new guy, and so if you just keep that habit of leaving on time, eventually people will realize that
this is your
just
boundary,
you
right?
know. Yeah, and so even when I changed jobs, that's what I did. And now, because of the work from home situation, it's a bit difficult to... I mean, of course you can just like shut down at 6 o'clock. But because of the company I work in now, it's kind of 24/7. I find myself checking my work phone at night because my manager doesn't work in the Asia region, Asia time zone. So sometimes if I need to catch them, I really have to like catch them and have an actual conversation instead of leaving a message and then, seeing it the next morning and then, having a conversation that takes like 3 or 4 days.
Yeah, just because you have to keep doing it over different time zones, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's...
So I mean, just sending a message at like 10 p.m. doesn't seem like much, but then, then I catch myself doing it and I'm like, oh no, am I falling back into my old habits?
Okay, so we realized that the video cut off. You probably have been staring at a still image for the last about 8 minutes of this video if we edited it that way. But maybe let's just conclude this part because I think it's something that we're still learning to cope with, learning to handle, learning to have healthy habits. So maybe let's just wrap up this topic on burnout.
So if you feel like you ever reach the brink, or whether you have pushed yourself to the brink or someone has pushed you to the brink, don't feel like you need to deal with it on your own.
I mean, not everybody would think of therapy, but I think minimally maybe just opening up to someone about the fact that you're struggling.
Even to your friend, and then you realize that, this struggle happens.
That you are not
alone.
You're not alone. Like, it sounds very cliche, but knowing that you're not alone really it soothes your mind to know that you're not the only one facing this struggle. Like, it doesn't solve your problem, but sometimes that's that little bit that you need first before you can take any further action.
And you also realize that everybody has their struggles, even if they may have different circumstances.
And people who look like they're not struggling it may just look that way. Like, it doesn't mean that they don't struggle. I think they maybe just have different struggles from what you have, for example. And like, I think like, I don't know. I feel like it's quite difficult to talk about burnout for high achieving people just because of like the initial wave of like
they don't really need help since there's nothing wrong with their performance kind of mindset.
But the issue is not like the results, the issues is with the process, I think. And I think what a lot of us don't give ourselves enough credit for is that this is a valid struggle. It may not be other people's struggle, but it is ours. And just because it can be easily criticized, I guess, by other people doesn't mean it's not a valid struggle or something that, you need help with or you want to talk to somebody about. Like, I mean, yes, not everybody wants to listen to this, so do keep that in mind sometimes when you find people to talk to about this, but somebody else has this struggle too. So you're not alone. If you really need help, I would say therapy, but I feel a bit hypocritical saying that when I have not been to therapy myself.
So I can't really say how useful it would be, since for me what happened was I realized I was in an unhealthy situation and I took active steps to remove myself from that situation and to never put myself back in that position again.
Yeah, but I think it's an ongoing process of learning, of like sometimes you have to go to the extremes of being super accommodating to like being super not accommodating, and then somewhere in between then you can learn to find your middle ground.
So it's good to learn about your limits and then learn how to manage yourself, manage expectations of yourself and others have of you.
I think the first step is really like learning about yourself and being aware that you even have these struggles. If not, you can't figure out what to do with them. Like, knowing the issue is the first step to figuring out what to do about it. So that's the end of this thing, and I think we ran out of video again. I think we ran out of video. Yeah, we ran out of video again. Oh no.